What do I mean when I say parent, not equal parent, equals a strong child? It's all about perspective. I believe when two people are raising a child, one of the best things about that is that each person brings a slightly different perspective to the parenting process. It's the difference in approach, the style, the manner, the words, etc., etc. Those differences challenge a child to see things from different perspectives. Developing that strength in your son or daughter, the ability to see things from a different perspective, it's huge. It's extremely important. Raising an independent, confident, good decision maker is raising your child to not just understand that there's always two sides to every story, but to consciously look for the other side to better understand any situation. Now, before I get too deep into this topic, I want to address single parents. There are many of them out there. They're raising a child on their own. Statistically, it's mostly moms, but there are definitely many single dads raising kids on their own. It's tough enough raising a healthy, happy, well-adjusted child. It's even tougher when you're doing it on your own. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. It's done all the time. And it speaks highly of those single parents that do the job, that make the huge sacrifice to do it well. I'm going to come back to single parents in a few minutes. But for now, I want to tip my hat to those single moms or single dads that exhaust themselves to do what's right for their kids. Now, why is having two parents so much more beneficial, generally speaking, when trying to raise an independent, confident, good decision maker? In my opinion, it's the different perspectives and hopefully very different styles of addressing problems. That's what's such a great benefit to kids. In earlier videos, I've talked about parenting philosophies versus parenting tools. Gentle parenting on paper may seem like a great approach. I could compare gentle parenting to communism or socialism. Let's say some academic may be able to make a great case for the positive aspects of communism or socialism. But in real life, those systems have done nothing but create misery and suffering. In practice, both are a dismal failure, basically 100% of the time. Gentle parenting as a parenting philosophy is a disaster for kids. However, gentle parenting as a parenting tool is essential. I absolutely used a gentle parenting approach as a parenting tool many times when my son was growing up. Gentle parenting was often the right tool to use in many situations. It was occasionally the best parenting tool to use. Gentle parenting as a parenting tool, not a parental philosophy to be applied all the time in all situations. Now, here's an analogy. After the massive flooding in North Carolina from Hurricane Helene back in 2024, a pseudo-communistic or socialistic attitude and approach was applied there on the ground. It wasn't about getting ahead, but rather all about helping each other. All those people, they helped each other to dig out, to rescue people, to make sure your neighbors were safe, that they had food, had the essentials they needed to survive while they're trying to get back on their feet. I'm not a fan of either communism or socialism, but I recognize that those approaches may have value in very specific situations. The same goes for gentle parenting. Occasionally a very appropriate mindset for a parent to have, but applied as an overall parenting philosophy, it's incredibly detrimental and damaging to those kids raised under that parental approach. Now, what does any of that have to do with two-person parenting? It relates because sometimes, most often in my opinion, One parent is much better at using a specific parenting tool. Women, generally speaking, are much better at comforting and nurturing. Moms bring a sensitivity often lacking in dads, and they do a much better job helping their kids manage their emotions. Now, obviously, this is not 100% true in every case, but moms tend to be the quote unquote gentle parent. Dads are often the disciplinarians and bring the authoritative necessities to child rearing. So, with that in mind, who do you think should be the one using the gentle parenting tool more often? And that would be moms, of course. But here's something every dad should consider. When dad uses the gentle parenting tool, it can have a huge impact. It can make a powerful impression on his son or daughter. Just like when mom steps up and occasionally is the authoritative parent and deals out some necessary punishment. Some parenting tools are better used by parent A than parent B, but a change up every once in a while can have a very powerful effect on developing your kids. Two parents, two different perspectives, two different approaches until they decide to turn that on its head. Now, there are so many benefits to having two parents. I'm betting you've probably watched police procedurals on TV. Cop shows are very popular and have been for decades. My wife loved NYPD Blue. You ever see the scene where they're questioning a subject and one plays good cop while the other plays bad cop? That makes for entertaining TV, but it's rooted in reality. Good parents do this all the time. Mom says, "You think that behavior is acceptable? Wait till your father gets home." Or dad says, "Your mother would be ashamed at you for behaving like that. You'll break her heart." Now, single parents can't do that. That approach, it's very developmental for your kids. For parents to play off each other, to make a point, to teach a lesson, to keep their kids on the right track, whatever that track happens to be. Parents that work together parenting their kids end up with a kind of parenting synergy. Synergy, the concept that 1 + 1 = 3. Now, I just said something that sounds silly when you first hear it, that parents should work together in the parenting process. Well, of course, they're the parents. Of course they're going to work together. But stop and think about it. Are they really? How often are they not? Here's one of the parenting traps that exists in two-person parenting, but doesn't ever come into play for a single parent. Too often, one parent is pushing X as a good thing, and the other parent is trying to convince their son or daughter that X is a bad thing. Now, X could be anything. It could be how to handle some situation. It could be the parent's opinion of a friend of your son or daughter. It doesn't matter what X is. What matters is that when mom and dad have an entirely different opinion about something and are actually working against each other in the parenting process. Here's a simple example. Dad, stereotypical dad. He's telling his son to deal with a bully by smacking him in the mouth next time he gets in his face. Now, mom, of course, on the other hand, is suggesting that her son not deal with it that way. Find the aid, find another adult, find a teacher, see if you can get rid of the situation, de-escalate it that way. Now, I've spoken about how to deal with a bully in a previous video. The response to bullying should, the vast majority of the time, should be to ignore them. Don't take the bait and let the situation escalate. However, if someone gets physical trying to bully you, I will always recommend that a young person vigorously defend themselves. Now, what does that mean, vigorously? That answer is complex and very specific to whatever case you're dealing with in the situation. And it's off point for the topic of this video. But here's what's important for this discussion. If mom and dad are not working together, If they're giving advice that contradicts each other, that will only confuse your son or daughter. It's not going to help them solve their problem. And worse, it might diminish the respect they have for one of you or both of you as parents. Since you're not helping them as parents, plural, but as parent, singular. But wait, you might say, didn't you just advocate for bringing different perspectives to parenting? And how positive that is when trying to raise a child. And now I'm saying that mom and dad having a different approach to handling a problem is bad. So, here's what I'm saying. Let me explain myself. I think mom and dad having a different approach to dealing with an issue, a problem, some question from their son and daughter is good as long as they are working together. Mom and dad should never compete for their child's attention or their child's approval or love. That should never happen. Moms versus dads, never. It's mom and dad's responsibility to explain to their son or daughter, to explain the different approaches, to explain the good and bad aspects of any approach, of each approach. Mom and dad working together. Two people with different backgrounds, different experiences, different approaches. It's much easier for two people to give a much more rounded, more thorough, full understanding of how to deal with something than a single person can. Let me give you an example of that. Generally speaking, most people get frustrated if they ever listen to an economist talk. Because an economist, they'll give you some lengthy academic explanation of a problem. And then they'll do a 180 and say, but on the other hand, and then proceed to contradict everything they just told you. But for parents, when mom gives a thorough, detailed explanation about something, based on her life experiences, her beliefs, and then dad gives his explanation based on his experiences and beliefs, that tends to give a fuller picture of the issue and how to deal with it. Think about this in the long run, not just when your son or daughter is in elementary school or middle school. In the long run, you're doing a few very important things. First, you're teaching your son or daughter to get advice. Seek it out. Find people that they can trust that will give them an honest assessment without pushing them one way or another. Second, you're teaching them to seek advice from multiple people. Get different opinions, different advice, different perspectives. You're teaching your young kids that different isn't bad. Different can be very enlightening. Different experiences might result in them, your son or your daughter, coming up with a solution that none of the people they spoke to offered them. Sometimes those different perspectives end up morphing into something entirely new. So, here's a cool story I stumbled on researching this topic. eBay. The founder of eBay, a guy named Pierre Omidyar, something like that. Sorry, I mispronounced his name. He was fascinated by the idea of connecting buyers and sellers directly, and the power of markets and the efficient exchange between the two, buyers and sellers. But he was stuck in the conventional way that this happens, conventional thinking. And there's his fiancée. She's into collecting rare Pez dispensers. The problem is, it's very difficult to find the specific Pez dispensers she's looking for through the normal channels at that time, like local classified ads or secondhand stores, flea markets. Where do you find those things? Pierre, he sees this. He sees how hard it is for his fiancée to find what she's looking for. The limitations of the traditional methods, and they're not working very well. And he has an epiphany. Connecting his fascination with efficient markets to his fiancee's need for a better way to find collectibles. This combination of different perspectives, the desire for efficient markets and the practical challenges of finding rare items, that led to the founding of eBay. eBay, an online marketplace for individuals to connect directly to buying and selling goods, completely changing traditional retail and establishing e-commerce as it exists today. Two people, two approaches, two perspectives. It's powerful stuff when used properly. And when I say used properly, I mean when used to benefit your child's development. When used to teach them some important lesson they need to learn. Parents are in a unique position. The trust, the power, the influence that they have over their kids, then add that to the specific knowledge of their kids that no one else possesses. Two parents can teach their kids from a very young age that there's often more than one way to solve a problem, that there are many ways to think about a problem, many perspectives. Two, kids start out having two very influential people in their lives working together. Those two can teach their kid that as an adult, the two can become 4 or 8 or 16. And raising your kids to become independent, confident, good decision makers is about showing them that seeking out different perspectives can be powerful. It can lead to understanding, and like in the case of eBay, can lead to incredible innovation and progress. Thanks for listening.